good day, everybody. Welcome to this exciting new series live from Jerusalem with Rabbi Aaron Dovid Poston. Now, I've been following this gentleman for a while. He's got a unique story. He's got a wonderful organization called Yibbaneh, and you can find him on his website, yibbaneh.com. You can find him on Facebook. You can find him on YouTube, but he's sharing such a wonderful message. What they do is they focus on community, and they focus on Hesed, acts of Hesed and loving kindness. Now, Rabbi Poston originally hails out of the Philadelphia region, but has lived in Jerusalem for north of 30 years. And so he's made true Aliyah, and it's his home now. And so it's always exciting to get somebody to share truth, share Torah out of Israel, and no better person than him. But Yibbaneh focuses on Hesed and loving kindness and community. And I think that this is something that B'nai Noach would benefit from, learning from this man in the sense of how they can show loving kindness in their regions and impact their communities. And what he's found is that it in turn sparks the growth of communities as well. And so I'm not going to beleaguer any points anymore. He can say it on his own. It's such a joy to have him with us. So without any further ado, let's jump right in. Rabbi Poston, how are you today? So glad to have you all the way from Jerusalem. Welcome. You're live on the air, and it's your show, so I'm going to sit back quietly unless you want to interact with me. If not, teach your lesson, share your lesson. You may see a hand from me with a question from the audience, but we're glad to have you, and I look forward to hearing what you have to share.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for inviting me and reaching out to me. I've been following you. I've been following some of the different rabbis that you have had. I'm quite impressed. You're very professional. I'm sure you don't appreciate all the kudos, and you're just doing a great job. And I think you are well appreciated amongst I'll call it the Torah community, not just the B'nai Noach, but just across the board. I mean, you're doing a great job, and I wish you hatzlacha, much success to continue, go from strength to strength. I think you have a great voice. I know that you were in sales of different sorts, but also talk radio. So I think you're finding your what you enjoy, which is, I think, key in life, right? A lot of people go into certain businesses where they just are not happy. They're not satisfied. And I think the key of happiness in life, which we should be happy, is to find the niche, find something you enjoy, and you get paid for doing it. I mean, I don't know if you're getting paid, but you're getting paid in the world to come. So thank you very much.
Rabbi, I just enjoy Torah. I enjoy the truth of Torah. I enjoy the love of Hashem. I enjoy the reality that your people have preserved, and the call for the 70 nations. This is just so profound. And if I can begin to share any of it or just conduit it, I don't know what you guys know. When I listen to some of these rabbis, they come out with things that wow, have never entered our mind. And I spent years in Christianity, and all I could say is I've heard rabbis say things that no minister or teacher or pastor has ever shared. And these are treasures that have been given to the nation of Israel. And I'm overjoyed to hear it shared. And so I know just talking with you, you had come up with the notion of beyond the seven. And I think that this is a beautiful, beautiful topic, because a lot of B'nai Noach and even rabbis teach you can't go past this point. This is for you. That's not for you. And your focus with loving kindness, with true chesed, is to teach people about the things that are really universal, even if they are beyond the seven. But not that we should do them as a Jew, but more that we should understand the moral imperative behind it. And you know what? Enough talking from me. Rabbi, you've got the stage.
Thank you. I just want to, I think, just start off in this idea. Why did we choose beyond the seven? Let me just give you a small story. There was recently a posting on one of the Noachide websites. Somebody asked, I think it was a very innocent question, a very good question, really solid. The person wanted to know, as a B'nai Noach, as a Ben Noach, as a non-Jew who's trying to be righteous, are they obligated, and the word obligated was used, are they obligated to give interest-free loans? And I thought this was my opportunity to finally share what I've been holding in for over 30 years. When I heard a rabbi speak, his name is Rabbi Yochanan Zweig, the Rosh Hashiva in Miami Beach. And he posed a question when I first became religious. I wasn't brought up religious. He said, why is it that the Jewish people are obligated to give interest-free loans to other Jews, which has depth? It means that you're going to feel as if each person is your brother. You would never give a loan to a brother with interest. It just doesn't make sense. He's your brother. You have to care for him. You can't turn your eye away from his needs, his time in need. So you give him a loan to get on his feet so he doesn't go down, 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 God forbid, where he can't get up. So you can help save his lifestyle, the way that he's living, by helping him out, by giving him a loan so he can save himself. Okay, great. But why is it that we're not allowed to give a non-Jew a free loan? You have to charge them interest. Now, we're not talking about the difference between a ger toshav or whatever. Okay, we're just talking about in general. Okay, so a non-Jew comes for a loan, the Jew can give him a small, very small percentage. It doesn't matter, but he can't give him a free gift. He has to charge interest. And he said that should bother all of us. Why is it? What's going on here? Why are we doing this? So he said something, I think, absolutely profound in terms of being a light to the nations. Now, I don't know. I know it's true, but I just wonder if it really resonates with everyone else what I'm about to say. I hope it does. That if the Jew gave everyone an interest-free loan, would we be doing our job as light to the nations? Meaning, if the non-Jew went to another non-Jew and he says, can I get a loan? I know the Jews give the interest-free loan. Why don't you give me an interest-free loan? He says, well, if the Jews give you interest-free loans, why don't you just go to them? So he'll pass the buck, literally pass the buck, pass the opportunity to do the chesed. He won't learn the important lesson. So what is the Jewish people really doing? We're setting up, through God's dictates, I'm going to use the word utopian, or let's say the best case scenario of how to treat your brother. Now, if we do that in a society, and it's somewhat closed, okay, I'm not going to deny that, somewhat closed, but they'll look into our society and say, wow, look how they treat each other. This is how we're supposed to treat each other. But if we gave interest-free loans to everybody, so then they would easily, and I'm not judging them favorably, I think it's just human nature. Why should I give them? Just go around the corner to Shlomo over there, or Moshe, and get your interest-free loan, right? So it makes sense in the scheme of everything. Now, does it mean that the non-Jew is obligated? No. But the opportunity to chesed, if someone needs a loan, you have to determine what's the story. If the person's a millionaire and he just needs some liquidity to make another million, so you don't have to give him the interest-free loan. In fact, you can also become a partner with him in whatever way and make money as well. But if someone is just laid off, like even right now, there's a lot of people out of work. But in general, if someone is, God forbid, on the cusp of sinking in debt, and he needs a fishing rod, right? He needs to learn how to fish, right? So you'll help him buy a fishing rod and teach him how to fish. You'll do the chesed, whatever it is that's necessary, free. And I say free meaning without interest, if your heart moves you to do such a thing. So I know that could be a controversial topic, and I think I brought it down to a level. And I hope that people will understand. I'm not looking at all the comments. I know there's a lot of comments. If there's anybody that agrees, I'd love to hear. If anybody has any questions about that particular point, if I fail to get it across, it's my fault. Okay, so it hit me as now it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Don't pass the buck. And this is really, I think, what Yebaneh is all about. It was the same rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan Zweig, who I went to with seeking advice. I needed to help somebody who was in need, but they didn't realize they were in need. And I asked him for advice. How do I approach this person? How? I don't think he's going to even want to answer the door for me, but I know that I can help him. Okay. It was a life or death situation. And I had certain experience in this field. And I knew that, in fact, I had family members his family members came to me and asked me to try to get involved. So I asked Rabbi Zweig, how do I approach this person? And he said the most wonderful thing. He said, ask him for help, right? And this is true by Jews, and I assume, and this is what I'm going to talk about tonight, that if you're a righteous Gentile, it will be true by you as well, or you want it to be true for you, okay? And that is that there are 3 character traits that every Jew has. This is from the Talmud, that they're baishanim, they have a certain amount of modesty, or tsunua, modesty. They're rachmanut, they have a certain amount of mercy. And they're gomel chesed. They want to help, right? This is our job in this world, to be teachers. And that's also what I'm going to talk about, Bezrat Hashem, tonight or through this series. I want to let you guys know we're going to go off on tangents. And I don't have ADD, although my wife accuses me of having ADD. We go off on tangents, and sometimes I'm going to ask you to help me come back. Okay, so I'm going to go off on a small tangent. We all know, everyone knows, oh, wow, it's such a big mitzvah for Jews to learn Torah, right? So where does it say in the Torah you have to learn Torah? Where? So most people I ask, they give me a quote from Joshua, right, to meditate in it day and night. But that doesn't fit the criteria. If I ask you what is the source for one of the 613 mitzvahs, it doesn't come from the prophets and it won't come from the writings. It's got to come from the 5 books of Moses somewhere. So every Jew says 3 times, twice a day, right? V'shenantam livanecha, and you shall teach your sons. That is the verse in the Shema, and you shall teach your sons. That's the source for learning Torah. So the question is, come on, that doesn't say to learn Torah. It says to teach Torah. I asked you again, where's the source in the Chumash, in the 5 books, a Jew is obligated to learn as much Torah, spend as much of his day learning Torah as he possibly can. So we already went through Joshua. That doesn't fit the criteria because it's in Joshua. It's very nice. Meditate in it day and night. It's true. It's not from the 5 books. So the Rambam, and everyone will quote you, Bishanantam livanecha, and you shall teach your son. So Rav Noach Weinberg, I was an Eish Torah for many years, Baruch Hashem, and he taught us a very valuable lesson. You shall teach your son is a imperative. It's one of the 613 commandments. But it's not listed as teaching. It's listed as learning. Why? Because in order to teach, you have to learn. It's a prerequisite. In other words, Rav Noach Weinberg then said, when you learn, you have to learn in order to teach. If you don't learn in order to teach, you're not learning the way the Torah describes. It doesn't mean you actually have to go out. Not everyone is capable of going out and teaching, but they have to be willing and ready, and the heart has to be there. And I think that also enables someone to actually learn better, right? If you know that you have to be able to have clarity to teach it over, to give it over to someone else, right? What it says in the holy writings, right? In the Talmud and many other places, they ask the rabbis, who did you learn more from? Your teachers, your comrades, or your students? And they all answered, I learned more from my students. The question is, how is that possible? How do you learn more from your students? Okay, so, it could be that they asked the good questions, so they force you to look deeper, right? That's one way. In other ways, because when you're preparing, perhaps, you're going to prepare, you have to get the clarity. You force yourself. I think it's a combination. I think it's many things.
Well, it works, yeah.
Yeah. With all that said and done, I want to go back to my original topic, which I don't say I forgot what it was, but I want to mention that the word corona is being used a lot these days. And we all know a corona is a crown. And I mentioned in one of my very last teachings that what we want to do, this is throughout Jewish thought, is we want to return the crown to its rightful place. Okay? Whatever that means. We're talking about the crown of Torah, or we're talking about the crown on Mashiach, we're talking about the crown on the Jewish people. Whatever the crown represents, and in this case, it means I want to say it means the Torah, that the corona is out of hand. It's just not in the right place. It needs to be returned to its rightful place. And the word in Hebrew for crown is keter. The keter. Kaf, taf, resh. So the equals 620. Okay? And yeah, 620. So what is 620? There are 620 letters in the Aseret HaDibrot, in the 10, what we call the 10 commandments. They're not really commandments, but they're the 10 statements that God gave over to the world that included all 613 plus 7. At Mount Sinai, there was a declaration, a keter of Torah, given over 613 plus the 7 Noahide laws were reiterated at Mount Sinai. So the Torah, when I say the Torah, I don't mean just the 613. I mean the 613, the keter, the crown, which includes the 7, should be put back in its rightful place. So I'm just amazed by I'll call them righteous Gentiles, not Gentiles, righteous, right? Coming back and trying to make the best life they can for themselves and for the world. And the Torah that I want to share, hopefully we'll get to before the end, is one of the most amazing pieces. I don't know how I missed it, but in preparing for this class, I came across it. That there are 30 non-Jews who are righteous in this world that are holding up the entire world and, right, and the idea of bringing back the Keter Torah, that are actually helping the Jewish people return from exile. Okay, it's in Gomorrah Hulin 92a. If anybody has access to it, so to prepare as we're going through this, 92a towards the bottom half, and the most amazing piece. And the Ben Yehuda, which is the Ben Ish Chai, lived over 150 years ago in Iraq. He learned. He's a Sephardi, but he learned from the greatest of the Kabbalists, including Ashkenazi, and he puts it all together, and it's the most amazing piece. Okay, so before we go off on that tangent with this Gomorrah about the 30 righteous Gentiles who are keeping the crown, I want to talk about the Cain and Abel story, because just in terms of what we call the Yetzer Hara, every human being has an evil inclination. And the Vilna Gaon, you've all heard of Rabbi Eliyahu, right? The Vilna Gaon, he claims, this is his, I'm sure he's not the only one, but everyone knows who he is, that the purpose of creation, the purpose of life is tikkun hamidot, is to work on your character, to fix your character. So in other words, it's here, right? It's in your heart and how you behave, how the heart plays out in the world. Is it a hard heart? Is it a circumcised heart? Is it uncircumcised? What do I need to work on my relationship with other people? So the Cain and Abel story is a perfect example. Okay. Now, my students who are listening have heard this before, but before the murder takes place, after the offerings are made, so there was offerings, and we know that Cain's offering was not accepted, and he was not happy about it. So Hashem approaches him and says, this is in Genesis chapter 4, verse 6, "Why are you annoyed, and why is your countenance fallen? Is it not true that if you do good, you will be forgiven?" Okay, these words are in the beginning, and anybody who read the Bible must have come across this. So if you do good, you will be forgiven. But if you do not do good, so then at the entrance, sin crouches, its longingness towards you, yet you will rule over it. I mean, you have the capability, the capacity to overcome. Now, it's very interesting because this idea of doing good in Hebrew, it says, "Halo im tetiv," if you improve, if you work on your character. So then you're really distancing sin. That's another topic I'm going to talk about, not tonight that much, but the whole thing of fear, yirat shamayim, having true awe, right? There's lower levels, there's different levels. There's fear, that means fear of punishment. And then there's love towards the reward. And then there's something way above that, which is still called fear, but it shouldn't be. It's really awe. And it's remote, it's mamish, it's seeing the exaltation of God and not wanting to, like when you're in such love with God, not that he could be affected, not that we really affect him by doing sin, we're really affecting ourselves, but you wouldn't want to affect him, right? Like in a relationship with your wife, right? There's certain times, okay, you fear what she would do if you did something. And then there's the next level, you love her. And then there's this other kind of fear, like imagine if she was sleeping and you forgot something in the bedroom and you need to get it. You're not afraid that she's going to throw the shoe at you, right? You're not afraid of the punishment. You're afraid that this is someone you love and you don't want to disturb their sleep. You don't want to affect them. So that's the highest level. Okay, I want to push that aside a second. I want to go back to what we're talking about, because that is just one of the topics that we will definitely cover in this series. So this is very important. And the next important thing is that then after the murder, so then God asked him, like, where's your brother? And what's the response? Am I my brother's keeper? Yes. I mean, that was like, hitting the nail right on the head. In terms of chesed, in terms of responsibility, we actually are. So of course it was a rhetorical question. And the answer is you have to be. Now, the Chofetz Chaim wrote a book called Ahavas Chesed, the love of kindness. Chesed means kindness. And it's really about giving loans, about helping people. But he in the beginning, he talks about chesed in general. So we'll spend some time using that book as well. But I just want to go over some other ideas of chesed and why it's so important, and even the word yibaneh. So in terms of yibaneh, why we called it, if you look in Psalms 89:3, God said, "For I said, forever will be your kindness be built. Forever will your kindness be built." In Hebrew is Ki amarti olam chesed yibaneh. For the world is built upon kindness. Okay, and we have in Pirkei Avot, the world stands on three things. You can find this, Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our Father, and chapter 2, Mishnah 1, that the world stands on three things: Torah, Avoda, and Gemilius Chasadim. On Torah, the Avoda is the service of God, and loving kindness. Now, what is it about Torah? If you guys, whoever's listening, wants Torah, if I ask you to sum up Torah, yes, it means instructions. Instructions for what? If you were looking into a book, and obviously people read, you pick up a book, you want to know what it's about, read the first chapter, read the last chapter, and you can sum up the whole book, right? So what's the Torah? It's all about chesed. It starts off with God clothing the naked. Hashem clothed the naked. That is an act of chesed. And how does it end? God buries Moshe. Nobody else. God himself buried Moshe. Right? That's how the story ends, this storybook. It's not a storybook. This amazing piece of work, art. Okay? So you can guess everything in between is about chesed. It's really about, it's an instruction manual. How? Now, there's another very important thing, because we're obligated to follow Hashem, to act like he acts. I just want to get the verses here clear. So in Deuteronomy chapter 11, 22, I don't know if you have it here, you can open it up, or you want to read the verse, or I'll read the verse. Let's see.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Deuteronomy
11, 22.
Deuteronomy 11. Verse 22?
Yeah.
You want me to read it, Rabbi?
Please.
Deuteronomy 11:22. For if you shall diligently keep all this commandment, which I command you to do it, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, and to cleave unto him.
So to walk in, what does it mean to walk in his ways? To follow his character traits. Just as he is merciful, we should be merciful. This, you think about, Judaism is not a religion, okay? It's not just a nation. It's a way of life. So for those non Israelites, okay? For those people who are not born Jewish, and they're making a choice. I want to cling to the Jewish people. I want to cling to their way of life. I want to cling to the Torah. And we're going to go into this because it's called Beyond the Seven. I'm sure I'm not teaching you anything new. It's not 7 laws. It's 7 principles or 7 categories. And there are many, I don't know if you call them toledot, subcategories, branches off. So many of them are interpersonal relationships, right? To follow Hashem. So to walk in his way, as we mentioned, the whole Torah is about what? Clothing the naked, burying the dead, and everything in between. Mamish, everything in between. And just if people want to know, if they go to the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, in Gifts to the Poor, chapter 10, laws 7 through 14, there's a list, 8 different levels of giving charity. And I suggest you do your own homework and check it out over there. And just in terms of the importance of doing chesed, in Gomorrah Ketubot 68a, it says, anyone who shuts his eyes against charity is likened to something, I'll say in a second, right? Everyone knows one of the 7 Noachide principles, laws, is not to do idol worship. So the Gemara says, anyone who shuts his eyes against charity is like one who worships idols. How can a righteous non-Jew, how can a righteous Gentile not rush to do chesed? Hosea 6, chapter 6, verse 6. For I desire kindness, not sacrifice, and knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. So remind me to talk about this idea of non-Jews, I'll use the word permissibility or sanctioning to learn Torah, right? There's almost nothing that they can't learn. I've had this discussion with so many rabbis, and they all agree with me. At least we're talking about, right, the Tanakh. Okay, we're not talking about the Kabbalistic writings or even the Gomorrah. Okay, but we're talking about the Tanakh itself. Can you read? I asked them, can you read a verse and know what it means without looking at Rashi or any other commentators? It's only what you heard, right? The oral Torah. So the answer is always, of course, you need the oral Torah. And if you look at Rashi, Rashi is almost always quoting a medrash. He's almost always quoting, we call oral Torah. We're quoting the Gomorrah. So I'm going to call it's not a chiddush, but my take on what it says in the Rambam, if we want to just skip to it now for a second, because I think it's an important point, why I think it's so important to learn Torah. Again, not all Torah. Everyone has to learn what's applicable to them. Fighting off your Yetzer Hara, as we mentioned by Cain and Abel, is obligatory, right? Everyone has one. And the Torah is the antidote. It says clearly, right? V'sam tam, the word, and you shall place them. There's a play on the word, sam tam. It's a perfect drug. It's the executor of life. So the Torah itself is the antidote against the Yetzer Hara. And it's in the Rambam. And I'm sure people are familiar with this. And it could be controversial and get me in trouble. But where it says a Gentile, this is in chapter 10 of the Laws of the Kings. A Gentile who studies Torah is liable to the death penalty. Of course, it's he says we don't kill anybody. It means it's not appropriate, and really they should be dealing with their own 7 mitzvahs alone. But as I began to explain, it's not just 7; it's beyond the 7. There are so many. Wait till you hear that a court, you can be a judge, a non-Jew can be a judge on a non-Jewish court, and they can even judge and rule according to Jewish law if they want, which opens up, they can what? They can learn almost all of Choshen Mishpat. They can learn such a tremendous amount of Jewish law, that alone.
It's almost
the Rambam,
necessary.
Yeah. The Rambam says here that as long as they can do any of the other mitzvahs, as long as they do them properly, if a non-Jew wants to keep kosher, how's he going to know? So this is really going to be the point here. In that same law, that mentions about the non-Jew not studying Torah, it's most people, I think, they don't finish reading it. They stop there and get very frustrated and upset. And I beg them just to go on to the next point in the same halacha that says the general principle of governing these matters is the following. So this applies to Shabbos as well. They are not allowed to originate a new religion or create mitzvahs themselves based on their own decisions. Which means, again, anybody that wants to learn Torah basically has to learn, and I don't want to sound so arrogant because it's not me. They have to come to the source. We stood at Mount Sinai. We were there, right? We heard God. 3 million Jews were there. And it was passed on from generation to generation, father to son, right? And Rebbe to student, disciple. There's no way that anybody, I don't believe, could read the Bible, I'm calling it the Bible, the scripture, the Tanakh, and understand what it means without going to whom? To the Jews. And I think that's what the Rambam is saying, that if you're ready to be righteous and you want to keep the 7 as a minimum, and you want to do them correctly, you have to go to the Jews and learn what you need to learn. You'll never know that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is not an eye for an eye, nor a tooth for a tooth. I mean, anybody reading this would certainly say, well, that's obviously what it means. It says what it says, and it means what it means. So how come in all of Jewish history that never was, never is, and never will be an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth? But we don't take it out of the total context. It means money. It means different types of compensation, 5 different types of compensation for the damage that was done. But that you only learn in the oral Torah. Okay, now also including in these, what we call the 7 principles, is another general principle, and that is that anything that is logical and makes sense is also included. So there's a tremendous amount that you can learn from the Jews. You have to basically go to them, or now, today, we have the internet. If you don't live in a Jewish community, it's very difficult to find the truth in most people's spheres, social spheres. But because books are readily available, good publishing companies and the internet, people like you, Dan, and the organization you're with, right, the Noahide World Center, and so on. There's so many out there that are getting the word out. Okay, so this is very important. The general principle. We're not allowed. It's a sin to create Christianity, and it's a sin to create Islam. But now that they're created, even the Rambam says there's some good. There's some good, and a lot of that good will be seen through the fact that when Messiah does come, he will be readily accepted. Right? Everyone's looking forward to a caliphate, a Mashiach, some kind of figure, right? But also the spreading of morals, right? And the 7 Noachide laws, believe it or not, most Christians, I don't know if it's most, let's just say a nice amount of Christianity is probably not idol worship, right? Let's just get that out on the table. We don't know. There's too many different sects, too many
40,
different
000.
groups. 40,000, I heard 80,000, but okay. So some of them border, and I think most Christians would agree with that statement, that some of them border on or cross the line on idol worship. And some of them, I don't know if it's a minority, I don't know the numbers, don't yet cross that line and are, okay, let's leave that for another time. We don't need to make any more enemies than we already have. Okay. There is another verse that I wanted to share, and I don't know where I put it.
I really love the Psalms 89, Rabbi. That was beautiful.
Here it is in Mishlei. That's Proverbs 16:6. Thank you. Okay, so this is a very, very interesting. Can you read it? Oh, you read it in English and I'll read it in Hebrew.
Proverbs
16:6.
Turn my mic up for the audience. 16:6 says, "By mercy and truth, iniquity is expiated, and by the fear of the Lord, men depart from evil."
Okay, so that's why we will discuss this whole idea of how to reach that Ramamamut, that highest level of awe, right? Not the lower level of fear of punishment, but a much higher level. But the first part of the verse is what intrigues me. In Hebrew, it says, bechesed, which means in kindness or through kind acts. Ve'emet, which means Torah study. Yichupar avon, sin will be forgiven, overlooked, expedited. This, I know a lot of people are looking for salvation and forgiveness. So
Right.
this is, put it this way. Let's go back to the Cain and Abel story. God says you could be forgiven, right? You have to work on your character. This is where it's all at. That's where the work is. I really have a lot more to speak about. I see that we've reached an hour, but I want to spend hopefully maybe 20 minutes speaking about this Gomorrah that I promised.
Rabbi, we're only at the 37-minute mark live, so.
Oh, okay. Great.
You got lots of time. Take as much as you need, sir.
Okay, I will. I thank you for that permission because I'm going to need it. Okay. How are the comments? Any interesting comments or?
We're joined by a good group. We've got people from all over. I've got my friend Angelica in the Vancouver area, Lower Mainland, and we got people still in Germany. And like I mentioned, we got people down in San Antonio. My friend Paul has jumped in and joined us. We got plenty of people. So yeah, people are enjoying it, Rabbi. Please, yeah, I love the way you've brought out that Psalms 89, this verse in Proverbs 16, along with Deuteronomy. It's just profound material with where you're heading with this. By mercy and truth, iniquity is expiated. I just love that.
Okay, great, because this is going to flip a lot of people out. And this is in the Gomorrah in Chulin, and 92a, somewhere towards the bottom. And I don't even know where to begin. I tell you, those who know me, I look at a piece of Gomorrah and I say, I have to go back. I have to go back. I want to get in context. And I see something most fascinating. I have to go back even further. And I never get around to what I want to get around to. So I'm going to go right to the point now. So the Gomorrah expounds regarding a certain verse. And it's talking about a verse that you can find. Tell you where it is. Where is it? Okay, 59. So this is in Zechariah, chapter 11, verses 12 and 13.
Would you like me to read it?
Sure.
Oh, that's excellent. 12 and 13. And I said unto them, if you think good, give me my hire, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my hire 30 pieces of silver.
Okay,
and
stop
the
there.
Lord, okay.
Stop there. V'yomer alehem, im tov beinechem. So he said unto them, if it's good in your eyes, what does he want? Havus chari, give me my fee. V'im lo, chadlu, stop, chadolu. But this other piece, v'shaklu es, okay, you know what? There is one more verse. Okay, now I know why sorry. Okay, what I want everyone to do is go to, I started too far down. Go to Hosea chapter 3, verse 2. We will get to that verse that you quoted, so that was not in vain at all.
Hosea 3, verse 2 says, so I bought her to me for 15 pieces of silver and an omer of barley and a half omer of barley.
Okay, let me give you some background on what this is talking about. So, Rav Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehotzadak, the word kira, in other words, it says the echre'eha. That literally means to acquire. Like mechira is a sale and an acquisition. So that's mechira with a mem. Here the verse, it starts and says, Ve'echra'a li, sell to me, right? Or purchase from me. I purchase. This is what God's saying. I purchase for myself for 15 pieces of silver, this a certain amount of barley and a certain amount of there are two different amounts. One is a chomer and one is a lesech. So we'll talk about that in a second. So the word kira, the Gemara tells us, means mechira, an acquisition. It means selling. The Gemara gives an example when when Yosef was dealing with Paro and telling him, I have to go bury my father in the Marsa Machpelah, in the cave of the patriarchs, it's because my father told me in the grave that I acquired for myself, because he purchased it from Esau. In other words, there was a sale of the birthright. Okay, so that same word is used over there. So we know it means to purchase. And in modern Hebrew, mechira is a sale. And the Ben Yehodah is going to flip us out on this word. So I want everyone to really hang in there. I know this could be a little complicated. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. But so far we read the verse in Hosea chapter 3, verse 2, about God saying, I acquired for myself these 15 pieces of silver. And the word acquire means acquire through acquisition. And we gave the proof text for that. And then the Gemara says like this. This is basically what God is saying. I acquired it, the Jewish nation, for myself. And what happened, the number 15, it says, Bih Chamisha Aser. If you want to say, I acquired with 15 pieces of silver, you don't use the bet, Bachamisha. Bachamisha is on the 15th. So it's referring to the 15th of Nisan, which is Pesach. God acquired us as a people when he redeemed us from Egypt. Okay. Also, the word for silver is referring to righteous people. Let me just continue with the Gemara. The pieces of silver are an allusion to righteous people, and the Gemara gives a proof text in Proverbs 7:20. It says, "Tzrur hakesef lochach biyado." He has taken the bundle of silver coins in his hands. So this verse refers to God's removal of the righteous before the destruction of the first temple. And we're not going to go into the whole prophecy over there. But in Gomorrah Sanhedrin, it discusses about Nebuchadnezzar and the people who were telling him and coaxing him on to go and attack the Jews because Hashem already removed himself. He first removed the righteous people, and then he removed himself from the temple. So basically, you have a free-for-all for destruction. But the Gemara then discusses the word chomer, which was the amount of barley, and also the word lesech. So chomer refers to number 30. That's the 30 soeh, 30 measurements. And the lesech refers to 15 measurements. Well, 30 and 15 equals 45. So this is an allusion to the 45 righteous in whose merit the world exists. Now, we're going to soon see we're not talking about Jewish people. Right? There's a famous expression spoken about the 36 righteous Jews who the world exists for, that without them, the world would cease to exist. Here, there's 45 righteous, and in the word I'll just use the Hebrew, Arboim v'chamishim tzadikim sha'olam miskayim behem. The world exists because of them. And then the Gemara says, Eina yodeya im shloshim kan Chamisha also Beretz Yisrael. So the Gemara goes through a little bit. We're not sure if there's, out of those 45, if 30 are in Israel and 15 are in outside of the land, or vice versa, that 30 are outside the land and 15 are in the land. And it resolves it by bringing in a verse from Zechariah, so that you can find 56 in Zechariah chapter 11, 13. So, right, you hadn't read that one. You read 12.
Okay.
So 13,
you want me to read 13?
Yeah.
And the Lord said to me, cast it into the treasury, the goodly price that I was prized at of them. And I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them into the treasury in the house of the Lord.
So this is a proof text that the 30 pieces, or the 30 tzaddikim, were thrown into we'll call Eretz Yisrael. In other words, this resolves it. Where is the temple? The temple's here, right, in Yerushalayim. And so these 30 righteous Gentiles are connected. They're embedded in with the Jewish people. And then, so that resolved that part. I want to go now to I'm going to say interesting, just to move this a little bit further along. So we have that verse 59 in verse. Okay, so we read the verse already, I believe, verse 12, right, where it said, and Hashem said to them, to who? To the nations of the world. Listen to the Hebrew. V'yomer aleihem im tov beinecha havu sachari im lo chadlu yishklu et sikru shloshim kesef, as it said. Now here, number 60, Rashi points out that this passage is dealing with the nations of the world. Look, just go back to verse 10. I want you to look at verse 10, and you'll see that we're talking about the nations of the world.
Zechariah
Go ahead.
11?
Yeah, Zechariah 11, but it's verse 10.
Verse 10. Verse 10 reads, and I took my staff graciousness and cut it asunder, that I might break my covenant which I made with all the peoples.
Right there. Right. So this is clearly talking about the covenant that he has with the peoples. So that was in verse 10. So now when he's talking about these 30 pieces of silver, it is proper in your eyes, give me my fee, and if not, refrain. And they weighed my fee, 30 pieces of silver. So now we have an argument between two rabbis, Rabbi Yehuda and Ula. Rav Yehuda and Ula. These are Amoraim. So Rav Yehuda says, Elu shlosham tzadike umos ha'olam. I'm sure the word umos ha'olam, you guys know what that means. These are the 30 righteous of the nations, umos ha'olam miskaimim alehem, in whose merit the nations of the world exist. So whether we go with the idea they're embedded in Israel, meaning that either they're ger toshav or they're living amongst Jewish people, they're living righteous lives, that they are keeping, just like the 36 Jews are keeping the Jews alive and the world going, so too there's something significant about these 30 righteous Gentiles keeping the merit of the nations. Now that's the first opinion. Okay, so what we have here is 30 very righteous Gentiles, and there's a lot riding on their tzidkus, on their righteousness. And what does Ula say? And this is going to sum up why we're talking about beyond 7, okay? So Ula says, Eila shloshi mitzvot shekiblu aleihem b'nei Noach. Should I translate? These 30 pieces of silver that Hashem took from the nations are his fee, as an allusion to the 30 commandments that the Noahites accepted upon themselves. What does that mean, they accepted upon themselves? You mean over and beyond the 7? Or again, are they subcategories of the 7?
Branches.
We'll leave that for other classes. Now, it does mention, however, they only kept 3 of them. What does that mean? Oh, they took on 30, and they're only keeping 3 of them? So I want to talk about these 3 real quick, and then I want to go to the Ben Yehuda. So what are the 3? They do not write marriage contracts for males. In other words, they're aware of the fact that homosexuality exists, but they don't flaunt it. They don't publicize it. They won't go so far as to write and call it marriage. Okay? So that is something which they kept, which we're going to soon see what these 30 mitzvahs are, very shortly. So that's 1. And I'm going to compare these to the big 3 in Judaism. We have 3 cardinal sins in Judaism, which are not doing idol worship, not committing adultery, or let's say sexual sins, and murder. So we're going to compare these 3. They kept these 3, means we'll see how we can compare them to the 3 big cardinal sins of Judaism. I would say already this is keeping illicit relations as much as meaning guarding illicit relations, meaning they know what's going on, but they don't flaunt it. Another one is that they don't weigh and sell meat of a human corpse in the meat markets, meaning we know they eat them, but they don't, go to you don't go to your I guess in Wuhan to the meat market. You don't go to your butcher and say, "Give me a pound of flesh of the human that just died." Okay, so they don't do it openly in the markets. So this is related to murder. They don't do murder. And the third one is, and they honor the Torah. So what does that mean? They honor. To honor the Torah means to honor the God of Israel, to honor the Jewish people, to honor the sages, right? So that means to believe in God, right? That's against idol worship. So that is this Gomorrah, which I thought was absolutely what's the word? An eye opener for me. However, when we look at the Ben Yehuda, it brings us to a whole nother level. I mean, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now here, let's start like this. I don't know how much time we're going to end up, but we don't have a time limit. Okay. So he mentions that the Gomorrah quoted, the word kira can only mean mechira, a sale. I acquired. Okay? It means that God says, I acquired. Now we said b'chamisha aser for 15, which we said is the 15th of Nisan. How many years were we in Egypt? Right? This is anybody wants to put down, right? On the comments. We were there for 210 years. So watch what he says. He says, with God's help, I can explain that God acquired the Jewish people with each and every one of the plagues. He brought us out of Egypt on account of the plagues, right? Where these makos, God only brought in, it was 1 year. It was only in the 210th year that we were there. Now, if you look at the word mechira, mem kaf yud resh hey, you have a resh and a yud. Resh and a yud is 210. And if you take those two letters out, you're left the word makah. You're left with the word plague. So you have, in the 210th year, you had the plagues in which God acquired the Jewish people. If you're not, that's his first comment. Okay. The next comment is about the 45. And I just saw someone comment, no, we're talking about 30 really righteous people that the whole world's depending on, just like we have 36 very righteous Jews that the whole world doesn't mean you can't be righteous. You're just not on the same level as them. And we're going to see at the end, hopefully, what this kind of personality is, right? The personality of these 36 Jews, or the personality of the 30 righteous Gentiles. Okay, so that was in Eretz Yisrael as opposed to the 15 outside. So now we're talking about the 45 tzaddikim. Okay. We mentioned the word 45 tzaddikim, and there was 30 either Israel and 15 outside. So the word kesef, it said, kesef is the word for money, the coins. That's a code word for tzaddikim, for righteous people. Money, kesef. Now, think about this. The word kesef is a kaf, that's 20, samech, which is 60, and a fei, which is 80. So he claims that these numbers all go up, 20, 60, 80. So in other words, you're increasing in numbers, which is significant. Okay, that's the first comment he makes. And the reason he says, because who are tzaddikim? And I think everyone listening to this, anybody that wants to increase in wisdom, the older they get, right, the wiser they get, right? There are some people, unfortunately, who have given up on wisdom. And they go and they play pool all day, or play dice in the corners, or who sit and watch, I don't know, whatever they want to watch, and they waste their life away. But people who are delving into, and I mentioned before, we're going to talk about fear of God. Fear and knowledge of God is the only way to survive and against your Yetzer Hara, and to increase your relationship, your intimate relationship with God and other like-minded people. Okay, so through increasing age and wisdom, that's how somebody becomes a tzaddik. And interestingly enough, that we compared it to two different measures of barley. Barley is animal food. Okay? It's animal food. So
Unlike
if you
wheat,
look
or
in Psalm, huh?
I said unlike wheat.
Right, wheat is human food. Okay, so look in Psalms chapter 36, verse 7.
Psalms. Let me just get there. Give me. Takes me a second.
It's really the
Psalms
latter part of the verse.
36.
It's chapter 36, verse 7.
Got it.
Your righteousness is like the mighty mountains. Your judgments are like the vast, deep waters. You save both man and beast. We say this. We say this in our prayers. Rashi says right there, what does it mean you save man and beast? Because people who are astute as Adam, that's really like man, you might have a good stature, but they make themselves as humble as beast. They're the ones you're going to save. So this gets into this whole idea of character trait. Basically, it's all about humility, right? The meek shall inherit the earth. That is from the Tanakh, not from some other plagiaristic source, but that's our source.
Thanks for
Oh,
clarifying.
yeah, so we're just beginning. Now, the reason for 45, the word in Hebrew, memhe, is ma. Okay, 45. So think about the numbers. Now we're going to deal with the number 9. So how do you come up with the number 45? If you add numbers 1 through 9, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 equals 45. So again, you're going up in a ascending order, but it's all 9 numbers equal 45 when you add them all together. And number 9 is the word, it represents goodness that doesn't diminish. In fact, the first tet is for the number 9. That's the Gematria 9. The first time it appears in the Genesis is for the word tov, good. It's goodness that increases. It doesn't diminish. Now, this is a little bit of a mathematical equation. I'm not very good at math, but Baruch Hashem, it's all written out for me to read. That you add 9, meaning 9 to 9, you get the number 18. Now, there's a thing called Gematria Katan, a small number. So let's say you have 1 and 8, right? 18 is 10 and 8, but you don't count the 10, you count just the 1. So 10 is 1, 20 is 2, 30 is 3. Clear. So you have 18, which equals 9. In other words, the 10 is 1 and the 8. So here you have 9 plus 9 equals, in its mispar katan, 9. And you can go further. Add 18 to 18, you get 36. So 3 and 6 is 9 and 36. Okay, do it again. So if you take 36 plus 36, you get 72. 7 and 2. Fine. And you could do it on to 72 plus 72 is 144. 144 is 4 and 1 is 9. And you can add 144 to 144, you get 288, right? 288 comes back again to 18, right? 2, 8, and 8, 16 plus 2. And 18 is obviously, the small number is again number 9. Okay, so therefore, what do we see? That every time that you have the number 9, it's always tov. Tov. The first tet, which is number 9 that appears in the Torah, is the word tov. And it always comes out good, and it never diminishes. In other words, it's not less than 9. So the tzaddikim are what hold up the world, and they don't diminish what is ma, what is considered mem he, okay, which again is all derivative from the number 9. I want to skip a little bit. Okay, God created the world, v'yomer. God spoke and the world came into being. The word v'yomer appears how many times? You ask anybody, they're going to say, well, it appears 10 times. Well, close, but no cigar. It actually appears 9 times. And the Gomorrah even asks, if you're going to tell me that God spoke 10 statements and the world came into being, how come the word v'yomer only appears 9 times? So it says, because Bereshit is one of those v'yomers, and those God spoke. He didn't have to speak, he just said Bereshit. Okay, but there's 9 times the word V'yomer is used. And the word V'yomer is 5 letters. So 9 times 5 is 45. So every one of these letters of V'yomer, God spoke and the world came into being, represents one of these righteous people that are upholding the world. Just I want to skip down a little bit. There's so much good stuff, but basically in Malachi chapter 1 verse 2, it says, I loved you, says Hashem, but you say, how have you loved us? Ahavti eschem, I have loved you, says Hashem, the Amartim, but you say, Bima, in Hebrew, Bima, with Mem Hey, with 45, you have loved us. That's not, it's the answer to the question. How have you loved us? This way, with the 45. That's how I have loved you. Unbelievable. And then in Psalms 144, verse 15, which we say every day a few times, praiseworthy is the people for whom this is so. Praiseworthy is the people whom God is Hashem, right? Whose God is their Lord. So in Hebrew, it's Ashrayam Shekachalo. Happy is the nation. Shekachalo. Happy is the people that Shekachalo. So the word kacha, kaf kaf hey, is 45. That it refers against to these 45. Also in Eicha, Lamentations, where there is mourning over the Churban Beit HaMikdash, over the destruction of the temple. So it says in chapter 5, verse 1, Zachar Hashem ma hayalanu. Remember, Hashem, what has befallen us. Ma, the 45. That, and I'll just use his words, the 45 tzaddikim ma'olam kayem aleim, the 45 righteous people that the world is existing because of them. Lo chasrum itanu gam b'zman hazeh, they were not removed even at that time, even though the temple was destroyed, the world still exists because of them and because of their humility, because of their merit. They are going to save us. They're going to save the Jewish people from gullus, from their exile. And this is where the crown, going back to the very beginning, it's not the end, there's one more paragraph, but I don't know if we're going to go. It's because of the return of the crown. The Jewish people should accept upon themselves in wholeheartedness the 613 mitzvahs, meaning as a group, right? Not as an individual, because not every commandment is for each Jew. Here also, Bezrat Hashem, I mean, there's so many prophecies, we'll talk about this another time. What's going to be like when the Messiah comes, or just before the Messiah comes? What are the nations going to say? We've been handed lies. We heard that God is with you. We recognize that God is with you. We're not going to go into them now. I just want to finish this last paragraph, which is quite long. So I'm not going to do it. It's going to take too long. Maybe we'll save that.
We're only just past the hour mark broadcasting. If you need a half an hour more or 20 minutes, I mean, if you've got it prepared, but it's at your discretion.
I'll be happy to. Okay, here we go. So we had that discussion about the 30 and the 15. Are they in Israel or are they outside the land, right? And we ended up by talking about the 30 were thrown into the treasury, and we discovered that it must be in the land of Israel. Keep that in mind. This is all numbers again. The Ben Yodah says in a Mishnah in Yoma dealing with the Yom Kippur sacrifice, there is this goat on Yom Kippur that there's these threads that are going to be tied, right? It's going to go out to the wilderness. And it's going to turn from red to white. So basically, there's a thread put on each one, a piece of wool. And this is the words used, tul v'tzei. You take this and go, and you take this and go. That's the language. Just imagine the depth of what the Gomorrah has to tell us about Jewish wisdom, how much we can learn. So the word tul is tesvav, which is 15, and then lamed. I'm sorry. Well, we do count it as 15, right? 9 and 6. Tesvav is 15, and then lamed is 30. So we're saying go with this tul. What does it mean? That regarding the 15 righteous people in Chutz La'aretz and the 30 righteous people in Eretz Yisrael, in their merits, tul, you will take their sins and go. Because of these righteous people, being the 36 righteous Jews, or the 30 righteous Gentiles, whether they're in Chutz La'aretz, the 15 in Chutz La'aretz, the 30 here, embedded in the Jewish people, that's part of this process on Yom Kippur, where the sin is forgiven. And the Chalukas Kaksha Eretz Yisrael Yesh Ba Shloshim. So there's a division. So in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, it's going to be 30, and outside the land there's 15. So when it said, I will acquire for me the 15 pieces of silver, we already spoke about the 15th of the month of Nisan, which is the day we were redeemed from Egypt. And it's 15, we call it, right, Tesvav here, but Tesvav is the same gematria as Yud Hey. We just don't use the Yud Hey when we discuss gematrias. We say Tesvav, 9 and 6, instead of 10 and 5. But it's the same thing. So we're talking about the name of God. So in Eretz Yisrael, where you have such a greater level of holiness, actually he mentions that it's taking the light of the Yud and the Hey in its fullness. So what is Yud and Hey in its fullness? When we're talking about gematria, we're talking about Yud, Vav, Dalet. So that's 20. I'm sorry. You have 10 for Yud, Vav is 6, and Dalet is 4. So the Yud, when it's spelled out, Yud, Vav, Dalet equals 20. And then Hey, Hey. So Yud, Hey, the Hey, Hey is 10. So if the Yud and the Hey in its fullness comes out to the number 30. And in Eretz Yisrael, where the light is so pronounced, so you get the Yud Hey in its fullness, which comes out to 30. And that's on account of the merit of the 30 righteous people. But outside the land, where the power is not so strong, misham Yud Hey b'milo, elarak niosos apashu. You're not taking the fullness, but you're taking the simple Yud Hey. So that's 15. And that's going to be the light of Tzimtzum. It's going to be very constricted light. It's not the light in its highest level. It's a simple light alone. But in Eretz Yisrael, it's not like that. You got the fullness. So now we understand an amazing verse in Psalms 118, verse 5. From the straits that I call upon God. So min ha-meitzar, from the meitzar, from the straits. The meitzar is related to Mitzrayim, but it means our constricted places I call to God, but it says Yud Hey. So that's talking about in Eretz Yisrael, that's talking about in outside the land. Outside the land, the light isn't so strong, so it's just a simple Yud Hey. It's a very constricted place. But the rest of the verse says, Anani b'merchav yah. But God answered me with the expansiveness of the Yud Hey. That's the Yud Hey and its expansiveness. That means in the full 30, like we mentioned, Yud, Vav, Dalet, and Hey, Hey is the fullness. Just amazing.
Yeah, I'm reading that. Right now, the Psalm 118.
This all relates back to the Keter. Trust me. This is all relating back to the fullness of the Yud and the Hey, the fullness of our ability to take on what we call beyond the seven. And you know what? I don't want to leave you without reading this letter, because this is going to be key. This is going to be key in understanding. This was found in the Cairo Geniza. That means it's not a trash heap, but where the Jews in Egypt placed all their scraps of Torah scrolls or mezuzahs or holy writings, and it dates back over 1,000 years ago, and it's based on the Gomorrah that I mentioned. Did I mention it? Yeah. This is really going back full circle, where we said there were these 30 commandments that the Jews, that the non-Jews, the Bnei Noach accepted. Remember, we spoke about it. It's in the Gomorrah that the Bnei Noach accepted these 30 commandments. So here's a list of them. Now, he begins with a little bit of an introduction by saying that, let me just read what he says. This is by the father-in-law of the High Gaon. His name was Shmuel ben Hofni. He was the head of the academy in Sura in Babylonia. But this ended up in the archives, we'll call it, of Egypt. dating back 1,000 years. So this demonstrates this idea that in Genesis 34:12, so demand of me such a bride price and marriage gifts. I shall give whatever you ask of me, but let me have the girl Dinah for my wife. So when the non-Jews were approaching the Jewish people to have Dinah, so they were willing to give dowry, right? They were willing to give these bride price and marriage gifts. So he's saying that there are laws amongst the non-Jews even then. So he says like this demonstrates that even prior to the giving of the Torah, they made use of bride price and marriage gifts, these constituting one of the imperatives incumbent upon all the peoples, quite apart from Father Abraham's progeny. Thus our rabbis state the children of Noah were commanded 30 commandments. So this Rabbi Shmuel ben Hofni goes on and lists the 30 commandments that were not explicit in the Gomorrah in Chulin 92. But this is his list. So I'm going to go through the list, and we're going to talk about a lot of these things from Bezrat Hashem in our series. Number one, they're all negative commandments except where they are listed as positive commandments. So let me, I'm going to use this, I'm going to use this one as the, here we go. So number one, so they're negative. Idolatry. One should not be an idolater. Number two, not passing a child through the fire as part of the Molech ritual. Number three, do not use the use of divinations. Number four, do not use illusions or alternatively predicting the prime time for embarking on a venture. Number five, making decisions based on omens unrelated to the undertaking. 6, sorcery. Do not do sorcery. Number 7, conjuring groups of animals or insects through charms. Don't do that. Don't consult an Ov, and don't consult a Yidoni. These are all, we'll talk about these in another time. Yep. Don't involve yourself in necromancy. 11, do not engage in forbidden unions. Okay, here's a positive one. The positive commandment to be fruitful. 13, the positive commandment to multiply. 14, do not engage in male-male union, even merely to enter a marriage contract. Number 15, mating diverse species of animals together, meaning don't. Don't perform castration. 17, grafting one species onto a tree of a different species. Number 18, murder. Number 19, striking the mouth of an Israelite. Number 20, blasphemy. Number 21, there's a positive commandment to honor the Torah. Okay, what does it mean to honor the Torah? We're going to discuss all this, not tonight, but 22, the positive commandment to engage in the study of those parts of the Torah that are relevant to the Noahites, which is a lot. Number 23 is theft, which in my opinion will understand that is why there's certain parts of the Torah that are forbidden, because that would be considered theft. But we're not going to get into that tonight either. Number 24, studying those parts of the Torah. Do not study those parts of the Torah that are exclusive to the Jewish people. Again, that would be theft.
Specifically, yes.
25, the positive commandment to maintain civil law. Number 26, observing the Sabbath, meaning don't observe the Sabbath. And I'll tell you my pshat right now so you understand that when the Rambam says observe them kihalacha, you can do anything you want as long as you observe them properly. Since a non-Jew is not obligated to observe Shabbat, he may, but he has to do it in a way that shows he's only doing it optionally. So that means to break what a Jew would normally do. Make sure you do something.
So I'm good to broadcast.
Yeah. Listen, the way a non-Jew would observe, or let's say, I like the word celebrate as opposed to observing. To celebrate Shabbat is to learn Torah, to get together, to pray, to say take off work, spend time with the family, but to not do malacha in the same way the Jews refrain from what we call malacha. Malacha means a very specific creative acts. They're not obligated. They can refrain, but they can't invent their own religion. Therefore, to make sure that they're not inventing a religion and doing something they're not supposed to do, they should make sure to do something that shows they're only doing it voluntarily.
Right.
Okay. We'll talk about that more as we learn more. Number 27, eating a limb torn from a live animal. 28, drinking blood extracted from a live animal. These are all things you don't want to do. Eating nevela, which is interesting. And number 30 is cannibalism. So I don't know if murder, we already said murder, so I guess after the person's dead, don't eat them. Okay, so that's the short list.
Haven't had any lately. But back up to the novella question. That was a prohibition.
It sounds like it from this list here, but not the Rashi doesn't agree. He brings something else. We'll have to talk about that. We'll hopefully get into all these different ideas and expound on them. But I want to give a plug for a book called Brit Shalom. And
oh, yes, Rabbi Hirki.
Turkey, basically, he talks about all the different, I'll call them the same thing I spoke about tonight, as 7 broad strokes of categories. And there's so many, you'll see there's so many mitzvot, so many opportunities. That's what the word mitzvah means, an opportunity to come close to Hashem, because it means l'chaber, to connect. There's so many opportunities for non-Jews. Some of them, they're even obligated as subcategories of these 7 mitzvot, 7 categories. And he has, I remember this book, I don't know if it's out yet, so I don't want to give too much away, but I want to promote it because he talks about behavioral guidelines, which is so fantastic because that's what it's all about. If you ever read the Kuzari, I would strongly encourage people to read the Kuzari. This king, we're talking about over 1,000 years ago, whether it happened or it didn't happen, doesn't really matter. But this king, I'll just give you like a real brief, and then we'll end, because we want to bring the crown, the corona of Torah back to its rightful place. He was a non-Jewish king who was in a quandary like most of us, most people in the world. I want to live a moral life, he says, and I don't know which religion to choose, right? So I'm going to have the leaders of each of the religions come and try to convince me, persuade me why this is the path I should choose. So he basically believed in God, but didn't know the best moral path. So the story begins in the first few pages discussing with a Greek philosopher, talking to a Christian, and talking to a Muslim. But the rest of the book is really about his conversation with this rabbi. And in the end, he decides this is what makes the most sense. This is the moral path, because I go to sleep every night and I don't know if I guess people think of, am I going to be saved or not, right? Am I living, when I go to heaven, what's going to be my judgment? So in Judaism, we say the first thing that you're going to be asked, were you honest in business, right? We know, do you keep Shabbos? Did you even worship idols or not, right? Were you honest in business? It's the behavioral guidelines, okay? So obviously, behavioral guidelines in terms of idol worship and in terms of all the other mitzvahs, but real tachlis, real meat and potatoes, something that is, you wake up and you're on the right path, So you activate your brains, you eat your Wheaties, you have a cup of coffee, and you sit down with a good book written by the rabbis and learn. Let's bring the crown back to where it belongs. So I'm glad I chose the title Beyond the 7. As you can see, it's not so simple. These 7 are, as I believe, 7 categories, and there are many codes. There's many details and instructions of how to behave, and hopefully over this time that we spend, we'll go deeper and deeper. And I hope this was quite fascinating, because for me, I enjoyed it, and I thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this.
Oh, Rabbi, you did a wonderful work. You actually went further, deeper than I had hoped, and I love the way you brought up the scriptural passages, and I was able to pull them up. But the sheer fact that you were sharing them and literally getting involved, we've had a good turnout today. People from all around the globe. It's exciting. As far as the Kuzari, Rabbi Goldberg of the Noahide World Center, he and I did one, and I know I've got some backgrounds already set up for him to do. Possibly, he might do another Kuzari series with another group. But also, Rabbi.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? So, for those who don't know, basically the king converted to Judaism, and his whole people, the whole kingdom, converted as well. Not that we're out trying to convert anybody, okay? Just keep in mind that it was so convincing of this rabbi's argument that so just keep that in mind. It's like I think they call it apologetics. Basically, it's from a Jewish point of view why Judaism makes sense as an instruction.
900-year-old work that stands to this day, and the logic and the rationale, the apologetics, like you said, they make perfect, clear sense. It's a great work.
I just want to mention also that my type of teaching is very text oriented. I try my best to use verses, to use commentary on verses, to use text, and it's not for everybody. So I really try, and I'm not sure if I'm able to bring the text down to a level that is, someone can consume it and eat it and benefit from it. So if anybody has any tips or they have any suggestions, I'm open to them as well.
Well, there you go, folks. You can always catch him on yibane.com. You can catch Rabbi Poston on Facebook and his YouTube site. Feel free to look him up, check him out, ask some questions. Don't be afraid to even drop some answers here or questions here. We'll try and get them to him. So, Rabbi, since today went well, are we all good for next week, same time? Or do you think you can fit it into your schedule?
Sure, looking forward to it. Shabbat tov to everyone, and have a great week.
All right, folks, till next week.